The Vanishing of Sedona Martin by Jim Twerell. Act 1. Sedona Martin. Chapter 1. Sedona Martin was drowning, and she was going to die. The smell of salt water was strong as it poured into her mouth, choking and burning her throat. In a series of hysterical fits, she pushed the water under her to stay above the sea. She could no longer see the beach, the lifeguard towers, or the town's summer cottages when the big waves lifted her over the surface. Her legs now stung with every kick, but she was young and strong, and she knew she was strong. Beneath her, there was no bottom, only endless water. If survival were an option, she'd have to remain calm. The riptide that had snatched her away from the shore had finally calmed, leaving her stranded almost a mile out at sea. The waves were massive and relentless, continuously pushing her under and then spitting her back up to gasp for air before dragging her down again. There was a deep, thunderous whoosh as they broke against the surface, a sound that terrorized Sedona. She was sinking. Now only her mouth peeked above the ocean, gasping for the dry, salty air. It was impossible to think rationally, to step back and remember survival guides, or the rambles from her lifeguard friends about riptides. Swim parallel to the land, she thought, but when she opened her eyes, there was only raging water. She told herself to kick and to bat her arms ferociously, but her body only twitched in response. Too stiff now to be of any use. Too vulnerable. "I'm going under," she screamed in her mind, and in one horrifying moment the ocean took her. She was falling deep into the sea. Without the comfort of that final breath, she was alone with a profound terror. Her lungs pounded, gagging on the last breath. There were rushing sounds everywhere, and it was more and more impossible to hold that breath, convulsing to keep it in. She tossed her body and jerked her legs, but her legs were tired and stung and fell limp. The blue water turned black, and the warm water turned cold. The ocean swallowed her. Something solid landed against her chest, and then swam into the ocean. Her mind filled with images of sharp teeth, enormous monsters brushing against her legs with their hard, slimy scales, and the million eyes of a million flesh-eaters watching her sink, waiting to nibble on her dead body. Her neck began to swell. Her eyes pounded out of her head. Her chest shuddered in convulsions. Sedona's tongue darted from her mouth, and the air escaped in 3 large bubbles. She couldn't understand how she was going to die like this. All those stupid concerns she'd had moments ago seemed so ridiculous. How her father would not let her go to the bonfire Saturday, or how Daniel Davies kissed that slut, Jazeel Pickford. It was 'cause Jazeel was 15, 2 years older than Sedona, and she was the daughter of a famous local musician. The girls looked nothing like each other. Sedona had black hair and a round face, while Jazeel was blonde with a pretty pointy chin, but she hadn't inherited her father's talent. Jazeel was vain, and it wouldn't be long before Daniel Davies noticed how vain and turned to Sedona. Would Daniel Davies cry, she wondered? Would those bright blue eyes tear up instantly? Would he run to his room when he learned of Sedona's death? She saw him crying it out on his bed, or screaming her name into the ocean, filled with regret for all the perfect memories he never shared with her. She loved him and never told him. Her sister should have been watching her. Where was she? There was always distaste between them, but would she let her die? Willingly watch her sink out to sea? They were born nearly 2 decades apart from different mothers, and their father's obvious favoritism toward Sedona didn't help. Her father would notice she was gone. Her father. He'd look out into the ocean, and when he couldn't spot his little girl splashing in the waves, he'd come for her. She was sure of it. But she had been in the water for a half hour, pulled out by the riptide nearly 15 minutes ago, she figured. No one had come, and now she was under this beast, and it would soon all be over. There was a deep pressure inside her head, and her ear tore in a million directions. What are you waiting for? Swim. She turned to what she thought was up and swam in sporadic leaps. Everything was black, and she'd lost all sense of direction. There was a flash of light, and she tossed her head feverishly for it. The light followed her and grew brighter, and soon Sedona realized she was dying. That infuriating need for survival was finally settling down. There was fear, real fear, ripping at her brain, but it was excusable. She relaxed her arms and legs, and a sensational relief tore through her body. Her muscles loosened. She shut her eyes to be alone with the light and the deep, womb-like sounds of the ocean. Everything was beautiful down there. Her legs became warm again, and her thoughts clouded over into a series of colors with no logic or direction. Her heart was slowing down, and she could feel herself letting go. Her chest was warm now, and the colors turned blue. The nurturing sounds of the ocean replaced with a single ring. Her head was warm, and just beyond the ringing, just beyond the colors, she heard the crashing of waves. She opened her eyes. The surface was visible only 20 or 30 feet above, and the summer sun rippled under the blue ocean. Swim. She heard someone yell, "Swim or die." Her body was rising, and with just a push of her hands, she broke the surface and was thrown into the dry air. Her face was caving in on itself, and her body rejected the air. She went back under and began to sink once more. I can't do it again, she thought. I can't die twice. She kicked the ocean beneath her and found her legs refreshed and strong. When she resurfaced, she could hear shouting behind the crashing waves. Sedona! The voice was panicked, a sound of absurd terror. Sedona! She tried to scream back, but her voice was gone. The sunlight was blinding, and the more the ocean tossed her around, the brighter things became. Again and again, the enormous waves crashed into her, but she was strong now. Her legs would never stop kicking. Sedona! It was her father. She took a deep breath, let it fill her watery lungs, and she screamed. A lifeguard boat was coming. It soared over a monstrous wave and landed down hard in front of her. Her father was there. The old man's dark, wrinkled eyes found her in all that water. He leaped from the boat, falling clumsily into the ocean, and swam toward her with surprising speed. Hold on! A wave took them both under. When he wrapped his arms around her, she could feel how strong he was. She was safe. He was screaming into her face, pulling back her eyelids. He looked so old to her suddenly. Her eyes were dilated, but he could feel the incessant kicking of her legs. Once he dragged her onto the boat, she was still kicking. On the crowded beach, she was still kicking. And when he held her that night so she could fall asleep, her legs twitched still. And that is how Sedona Martin almost died for the first time.